Good afternoon and welcome to the Eldercare Advocate here on WIOX Community Radio. I'm your host, Ann Thayer, a program manager for the Alzheimer's Association of Northeastern New York. Rundy Purdy, author of The Sea is Wide, a memoir of caregiving, will be a keynote speaker at the Alzheimer's Association Caregiver Conference on Thursday, April 28th in Oneonta. Today on the Eldercare Advocate, we get to meet Rundy and hear about his profound and unusual experience as an Alzheimer's caregiver. Also, like always, our friend Carol Keene-Kirky is here to tell us more about the upcoming Caregivers Conference. Thank you both for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
Hi, Ann. It's nice to be back.
Thank you. So, Rundy, I found after being a program manager for the Alzheimer's Association for 10 years, I found that your story is unique in the fact that I typically don't run into young men who, in their 20s, take on the role of a caregiver.
Yeah, I don't know that I've met another person in my same situation. I've read some stories by young women who took care of their grandparents, but I've never met another young man. I'm sure they're out there, but definitely in the minority.
Yeah, definitely something unique. So how did that come about?
Well, my younger brother Arlen was living with my grandparents when he's going to college in Vestal. And he was nearing graduation from college, and he'd been living with them at that point for 4 years. And through those 4 years of time, he had seen my grandfather getting worse and worse. Now, typically, you'll find often in families that the husband and wife in that kind of situation will kind of try to mask how the one person who has Alzheimer's is getting worse from the rest of the family, so nobody else knows how difficult it is.
Is that what your family did, Carol?
It's what I did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Arlen had a little inside peek into what was actually going on. And it was the spring of 2006. He was going to graduate in a few months. And he came to me privately and said, Rundy, I don't think Grandma's going to be able to take care of Grandpa much longer. And I'm thinking when I graduate, I shouldn't get a job. I should stay and take care of Grandma and Grandpa. And my response was, no, you get a job. If Grandma needs help, I'll help her. And I had two different ways I reasoned that out to myself. On the one hand, I said, well, my personality is better suited for being a caregiver than Arlen. And also, he's just gone through 4 years of college, and if he doesn't get a job right away, who knows if he can. Whereas I was staying at home trying to be a writer at that point. I figured I can stay at home and take care of Grandpa and write at the same time, and so nobody will have to make any sacrifices. Well, true confession, I didn't get all that writing done that I thought I was going to, but that's what I was thinking to myself. And then I also thought, well, it just feels like the right thing for me to do. So we both went to Grandma and said, when you can't take care of Grandpa anymore by yourself, Rundy will help. Now, Grandma didn't want to bother anybody, didn't want to be a burden on anybody, so she said, I'll be able to take care of Grandpa for a long time yet. I might need a little bit of help at the very end. Well, it turned out a little different than that. About a couple months later, she finally kind of had a breakdown, and I ended up coming in. But it was a situation where nobody really wanted to admit that Grandpa was
declining.
Declining. And so it took my brother Arlen's impetus to get me to make a commitment. And a lot of people in the family didn't all agree exactly how bad Grandpa was. But if I was volunteering and Grandma wanted my help, well, who's going to complain about that?
Mm-hmm. I always find that it's interesting the different levels of understanding and acceptance it is for families, because some family members who live out of town, they're like, oh, everything is fine because they have the 5-minute once a week phone conversation with the individual. They don't realize that they have the same conversation every single week. And especially the older generation, those in their 80s, I find they want to do it themselves. They don't want to admit that they don't need assistance. How about you, Carol? Were you reluctant to accept some help?
Absolutely. And I'm sure Rundy is going to address this as we speak today. But, Terry was my husband. It was my responsibility to care for him. And I wasn't in my 80s and thought I was certainly well prepared. Who knew him better than me? But the physical toll, and of course Terry had some behaviors to develop that made it unsafe for him to be at home. I think Rundy and I are both going to tell you, don't do what we did.
Yep.
So when did you first realize, really to the degree, that Grandpa needed assistance?
Arlen, of course, brought stories home when he come home on weekends from the college about the things Grandpa was doing. But for me personally, the first time I really knew in a personal way that something was wrong with Grandpa when he came over for a birthday party. And they always came over for all the kids' birthday parties. But this time, when Grandpa came over, he was different. I noticed when he was sitting at the dinner table and all the boisterous conversations going on around him, he was hunched at the table over his plate like everything was too much. And sometimes halfway through the meal, he'd stop with his fork half raised. It seemed like he drifted off into his thoughts and only to come back to see everyone else around him with a start. And then after the meal, he got up and he went into the kitchen. He was acting so hesitant, I decided to see if he needed any help. I followed him into the kitchen and said, "Hey, Grandpa, can I do something for you?" And he turned to me very agreeably and said, "Oh, no, I'm just going to go take a leak over in the corner over there." Mm-hmm. So I directed him to the bathroom where he finished his business appropriately, and then we all were out on the porch talking. So he came out and he sat down in a chair on the porch. And a few minutes later, he got up, went back into the house, and I went in after him, and he went to the dining room table and took one of the dinner rolls off that was left over and asked me to wrap it up. I was like, okay, it's a little odd, but not too bad. So I wrapped it up for him, and he took it and thanked me, went back outside, and he put that dinner roll on his chair, and he sat on it. Now, I managed to figure out then what was going on in his mind. His chair had been a little too hard. He needed something soft to sit on. But instead of thinking of cushion, he thought of dinner roll. And so that evening, I saw that my grandfather was changing because he had always been a very polite, a very respectable person. He would never have even jokingly said he can go take a leak in somebody's corner, and he never would have sat in a dinner roll. So that was when I first personally really saw how his mind was changing.
Right, and those are definitely things that you can't write off to just being a little tired or, normal aging. Those were definite signs.
Right.
How about Carol? What were some of the first things you noticed?
Oh, gosh. Very subtle things at first. Terry would leave me a note when he went off to the store to play golf or whatever. I couldn't read it. It just was scribble. It made no sense. And, of course, I thought, well, he just didn't have his glasses on or what have you. But then to see him do some unusual things like, as the snow was melting one springtime, while Terry was still at home, he took the shop vac out to vacuum out the, the water that was collecting in the backyard. And to him, just like your grandfather, Rundy, sitting on that roll made perfect sense. Vacuuming up that water made perfect sense to him. And the day that Terry left home, dressed in his shirt and a windbreaker, underpants, socks, and shoes, but no pants, and headed down one of the main roads in town. I was at work. We still thought Terry was okay home alone, but he was going to a friend's house because he knew she could help him put his pants on, and he was having trouble with that. Well, the police picked him up, and, the story escalated from there, but it makes perfect sense to the person suffering from dementia, and it doesn't make sense to us, but if you think about it, you begin to understand why it makes sense to them, and that's really key in caregiving.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And people with a dementia like Alzheimer's disease live in the way I look at it is they live in a parallel universe and in a different world, so to speak. And we can visit their world, and all of these examples that you're providing make total sense in their world. In our world, it doesn't make sense. And it's difficult for them to join our world. They can't. So we have to join theirs to make sense of what's going on. And to come to terms with this is really becoming educated. You have to become educated about the disease.
Absolutely.
And really to understand what's happening to the person, and that our approach to things has to be a little bit different than it has been throughout our entire lives with this individual.
Right.
Yeah, I think, my first reaction was to try and correct Terry's behaviors until I realized that was pointless and probably even a little cruel because, again, to him, it made perfect sense to be doing what he was doing. So to guide and to honor someone's decisions, even though they don't match your world, as Ann says, is another key component of caregiving.
I found that making suggestions was a good idea. And if a couple suggestions didn't get them onto a more profitable track, you kind of let things play out so long as it wasn't dangerous and they could discover things weren't working for themselves. Like you talk about the going down the street without any pants on. There's one time Grandpa was going out to get the mail. He loved to get the mail. And it was always a production for him. And one day I saw him heading for the stairs, and he had a couch cushion under one arm and two shoes in the other hand and no shoes on his feet. And so I asked him where he was going, just to get the mail. I said, "You want to put some shoes on?" "No, I'm all set." So I didn't argue with him. I helped him open the door. He walked out, and about 2 seconds later, the doorknob was rattling, and I opened it, let him back in. He says, "I can't be out here. I don't got my socks on." But if I'd argued with him about that, we would have had a big fight instead of just letting him go out and come back in, and we got everything all straightened out without any fight because I just let him do his thing and just suggested stuff.
Mm-hmm. And that's a good point. I think even though the behavior may be, in our minds, bizarre, to encourage and to praise, even though it may be a little bizarre, is so important because the person with dementia still just so desperately wants to be somewhat independent and valued and worth something in somebody else's eyes.
And I find I made up my own rules, as I often do, and I have a rule that I refer to as the rule of 5. If it doesn't matter in 5 minutes, then don't make a big deal out of it. Because usually within 5 minutes, they've moved on to something else. However, if we've made a big deal about it for the last 5 minutes, that's the thing they tend to focus on. Those things with strong emotions. So if you're just tuning in, you're listening to the Eldercare Advocate here on WIOX Community Radio in the Catskills, and from the Catskills at WIOXradio.org. And our guests today are Rundy Purdy, who's the author of The Sea is Wide, a memoir of caregiving, and Carol, our friend Carol Kirky, Keen Kirky, is here, and we're discussing their experience as caregivers. Also, to let everyone know, we do have the Alzheimer's Association of Northeastern New York, the Leatherstocking region, is hosting a full-day caregivers conference in Oneonta, and actually all 3 of us will be there that day. We hope that you're able to join us. More information is available about the caregivers conference at alz.org/northeasternny under our upcoming events. So we'll just tell you a little bit more about what's going on, and we'll share some more stories about caregiving along the way. So Rundy's going to be there in the morning. You're going to you have a whole keynote section, so you have a pretty long presentation to give. And you're going to bring some of your books.
Yes, I will bring my books for anybody who's interested.
Maybe we'll set up a table and you can do some signing.
Absolutely. If you got time available for me to do that, I don't mind.
Definitely.
I'll hang around as long in the afternoon as you want after my talk's done for people who want to ask questions afterwards or talk or share their own story with me.
That'd be fantastic. So we have that going on, and then we have lunch. And then also New York State, this is something New York State is just starting to implement. New York State has now realized that it's more cost-effective to keep people at home than to go into long-term care facilities. So they have these new programs. They're called Managed Long-Term Care, and it's funded through the New York State Medicaid system, which would actually allow for folks to get some in-home care and support through that. So we have a lady, Muriel Miller, who's coming from the Empire Justice Center in Albany, who's going to talk about those managed long-term care programs and how people can get signed up.
Excellent.
And then Carol, our friend here, starred in some video clips.
Well, I wouldn't say starred.
Featured, starred.
Fred Johnson, a dear friend and also a caregiver for his wife who had suffered from Alzheimer's disease. We volunteered our services to Anne and to Cynthia Ploutz, who is an instructor up at Hartwick College in the nursing department. And we thought it would be interesting to give it a try. We scripted out, or semi-scripted, I guess, some scenarios that caregiving families often encounter. And we taped situations in which Fred was the patient and I was the caregiver, and we handled the situation the wrong way, and then retaped handling it the right way. Of course, there's a lot of latitude there between what's right and what's wrong.
For sure.
But Fred and I know each other well, and I'll tell you the hardest thing about this project was in the wrong way, I'm supposed to lose my temper and get frustrated and so forth, and I just had the hardest time getting angry at Fred. But once we agreed that he would be belligerent and I would be nasty, let the show go on, and so we'll be offering a session at the Caregiver Conference for folks to view 3 of those clips and to discuss, why was that the wrong way? What did you notice? How did you feel when Carol did that to Fred, or those kinds of things? So we hope to have some good conversation about 3 of those caregiver clips.
be quite interactive, and I'm facilitating that discussion, and Carol and Cindy are both there on a panel. We even have some prizes for people who will be being interactive that day. And then I thought it would be important to leave everyone on a positive note and rejuvenated. So we actually have Kelly Morrissey, who's come in. She's a certified Silver Sneakers yoga instructor, and she's going to give us some tips and things that we could actually do back home, like some gentle stretches and meditation and relaxation, because it's really important as caregivers that we take care of ourselves. Of course, education is important in taking care of our loved one. And I always think of you, Carol, when I say this, you and Terry's journey, the best thing you can do for your loved one is to take care of you.
I knew Anne gave me the stink eye when she was making that comment just a few moments ago, but in all seriousness, it is true. And I'm sure Rundy has heard that from many people. I surely heard it, especially from the priest who married us. You know, Carol, the best thing you can do for Terry is take care of yourself. And sometimes it's hard to figure out what exactly that is. You know, I didn't take good care of myself, but I thought I was taking care of myself. And so to rely on some folks who have been down that path and some professionals who can offer some suggestions for just doing little things that will make you spiritually and physically feel better, I wish I had done more of that. And happily, this conference is really kind of all about that, how to be a better caregiver, from taking care of yourself to talking to folks who have been on that journey. Rundy will have, you know, a whole boatload of experiences to share with us. So I'm going to be volunteering there, but I'm looking forward to this conference.
That is such a crucial thing. It's one of the points I hit on my talk is taking care of yourself, because so many caregivers with very good intentions burn out because they're trying to be Superman or Superwoman and do everything that their loved one needs because they're so invested in providing good care. And they don't realize that being invested in providing good care means asking for help, means taking care of yourself. And if you don't ask for help and you don't take care of yourself, then you will burn out.
Oh, definitely. And just by having a little time away to yourself, build in some respite, you have an opportunity you don't even have to leave the house. Go take a nap, go work in the garden, whatever it is that rejuvenates you. And it's different for every one of us. You're better equipped to answer that same question the 100th and 10th time in one day. I find I'm currently not a caregiver for somebody with Alzheimer's disease, but I have two 15-month-olds at home, and that's just as challenging.
Many parallels.
Yes, many parallels. And I find that, after being home with the twins 24 hours a day for 4 days straight, I find myself losing patience and having to incorporate some of this self-care even as a young parent.
Oh, I'm sure. And kudos to Anne, who recognized that I wasn't taking advantage of people's offers for help. And she used to come once a week for a while and have a date night at home with Terry. Well, sometimes all I did was go out and ride around in the car, and listen to music on the radio or go in the car and make a phone call or whatever.
I went grocery shopping.
Grocery shopping. And, I always thought that my answer to what are you doing to take care of yourself was, I'm spending time with Terry. That's really what I want to do. But of course, his needs were escalating, and Rundy is nodding his head yes. And the hardest decision during that entire journey was the decision about nursing home care. And for us, the decision was pretty much taken out of my hands. We had an emergency situation at home and had to make a 911 call, and that pretty much took care of that decision. But I recognized later that it didn't mean I was a failure as a caregiver to seek nursing home placement for Terry. And in fact, I was getting the help I needed there from our caregivers at Otsego Manor, which is where Terry lived for the last 5 years of his life. And suddenly, I wasn't having to do every single thing, and I was able to go home at night and sleep. I was very thankfully able to be there each day. I had my 4 to 11 shift, but there was help, and those people were support, not just in a physical sense, to do the things that Terry needed help with, but they were people I could vent to, I could learn from. It was really a remarkable experience. And, my advice to folks out there who are thinking about nursing home placement, it's not always a bad choice.
That's absolutely right. Where I end up on my presentation is addressing that very question, because people will hear my caregiving experience, and we all naturally compare ourselves to other people, and so you start feeling guilty because you think you weren't as good as the other person. Mm-hmm. And I try to tell people that we are all different, and we all have different situations, different levels of health and ability, and how you provide the best care for your loved one is recognizing your limits and not trying to do more than you can do. And so good. If you have reached the limit of what you can do, you're not failing your loved one by getting help elsewhere. You're actually providing the care they need by passing the baton to whoever else can provide the care that you no longer can. So it's not about beating yourself up. It's about admitting that you're human and you can't do everything.
Mm-hmm. I meet with I meet close with 50 families a month at least, hopefully more, as time goes on. And I never advocate for the person to stay at home, and I don't advocate for the person to go into a facility. I advocate for the highest quality of life.
That's right.
And it's not necessarily just for the person with the disease, but also their caregiver. There's been situations when I've visited somebody at their home, and the wife has made that promise, I'm going to keep you home. And I'm looking at this couple, and the husband is twice the size of the wife. He's losing his ability to walk. They lived in a split-level home, and the wife is literally pushing him around in a computer chair. And I'm looking at this situation and having to instruct them that maybe this isn't the best quality of life for either of them. I've known people to thrive with a little bit more support at home and have been able, like Rundy, to keep their loved one home through the whole progression of the disease.
Yes, but I could pick Grandpa up off the floor.
Exactly. You had youth on your side and
right.
muscles and
right. And when if you're the wife in that situation, you've reached the end of the road. If they no longer can walk and they have to be picked up off the floor and put to bed or at the dinner table or whatever it is, it's something that I think you can handle better if you realize where it's going and prepare yourself in advance. And that's why early on in my presentation, I try to remind caregivers in the audience that this is where Alzheimer's goes. And you might not be able to walk that entire road yourself, so prepare in advance. If you know that eventually they're going to be incontinent and not going to be able to bathe themselves and not be able to walk, then you can start asking yourself, well, how far can I take this before I need help? And that way you can prepare yourself in advance, and it's not a crisis where it all comes upon you suddenly.
Yeah. Anne talked about making a promise to your loved one that you would never place them in a nursing home. I never made that promise to Terry. I think this happened, so suddenly, and he was so young, and we thought it was something else, and so I never made that promise, but I never talked much about the stresses of taking care of Terry and everything else at home. And one day, a little thing happened that made me realize that he was worried about me. And that was a wake-up call, because he had this disease. He was still the person he always was. He still loved me, and he was worried about me doing too much. And so when it came time to sit down and make the application just to go on a waiting list, just in case, I explained to Terry that this was an application for nursing home care, that if he wanted to, we could go and visit, that we weren't going to do anything right now, but just in case I needed more help in taking care of him. And he cried. And I thought, oh, great. And then he said, thank you, thank you. And that was the wake-up call to me, that this man was still aware of the reality of the stresses of caregiving.
That was the hardest part for me, is that Grandpa was aware. I didn't want him to be aware that I was making sacrifices for him. But just like Anne said I called...
I don't mind, she's younger.
Okay. I also had the experience where sometimes Grandpa would demonstrate a crushing awareness of his failures. And, there'd be sometimes we in the period where he was having problems at night, and we'd have a bad night, and the next morning he would get up, so I'd get up to fix breakfast because he couldn't fix it himself, and he'd say, "Oh, go back to bed, I'm going to kill you, get me up all night like this." Or he'd make a mistake in the bathroom, and he'd come out and call himself a dirty old man and apologize for making a mess in the bathroom. And it broke my heart because I could see that this was breaking his heart, that he wasn't this unaware person wandering off into the mist. He was very aware of his losses and his failures. And I didn't want him to be aware of those things.
It's amazing the difference between people with Alzheimer's disease, because there are people who are very aware, and then there's people that have no insight or perception into their inabilities at all. I've seen the whole spectrum. It's very different. It's very unique. Everyone's journey is different.
And then there's a difference between acceptance and denial. Some people realize it and deny it, and other people are more accepting of it. I actually ended up having 2 grandfathers who had Alzheimer's. My second one died last year, and he denied to the very end that he had the disease. He knew things were wrong, but he would always give other explanations for what was wrong. He didn't have Alzheimer's. Maybe he had brain cancer, but he didn't have Alzheimer's.
And, it's okay. I meet people wherever they are in the journey, whatever level of acceptance that they have. The family can still become educated and learn how to support them.
Hi, this is Sonny Oakes, host of Folk Music and Other Stuff, Friday afternoon on WIOX, here to tell you about a wonderful musical experience coming up at the Middleburg Library the day after my birthday, April 13th. Mike Agranoff, a multifaceted musician and storyteller who will take you from Tin Pan Alley through the hidden hallways of his mind to your heart and soul at the Middleburg Library on New York State Route 145. That's Main Street in Middleburg on Wednesday, April 13th. More information at 518-827-5142. I hope to see you there. Did I mention it's on the day after my birthday?
WIOX is supported by MTC Margaretville Telephone Company, offering multi-feature cable phone service with unlimited domestic long-distance calling, caller ID, three-way calling, and more, all with your current phone number. MTC Margaretville Telephone Company, 845-586-2288 or 877-727-2288. WIOX is supported by Home Goods of Margaretville, corner of Main and Bridge Streets in Margaretville, New York, offering professional and at-home chefs in the Central Catskills region, cooking basics and tools of the trade. Home Goods carries Cuisinart, KitchenAid, All Clad, local pottery, and more. Open 7 days a week. 845-586-4177 or hgom.net.
You're listening to the Eldercare Advocate here on WIOX Community Radio in the Catskills at 91.3 FM and from the Catskills at WIOXradio.org. Today joining us is Rundy Purdy, who's the author of The Sea is Wide, a Memoir of Caregiving, as well as our friend Carol King-Kirky sharing her experiences with us again. Thank you both.
Thank you for having me.
Always a pleasure, Anne.
So we're just discussing the importance of caregivers taking care of themselves and becoming educated. And Rundy, you were the caregiver for your grandfather who had Alzheimer's disease?
3 years from, well, not exactly the time of his diagnosis, maybe approximately a year after his diagnosis until his death 3 years later.
Do you feel as though that maybe you saw things prior to that diagnosis?
Oh, yes, absolutely. Both really shocking things like wanting to take a bathroom break in inappropriate locations, to the misuse of equipment, to misunderstanding conversation, and things that were relayed to me I didn't personally see as well. Like, I think this is probably one of the earliest things that was really vivid about him having Alzheimer's, and nobody realized it yet at this point, is when he went into a gas station after he was going to pick up a few things, and the person at the counter, after he gathered a few things he wanted to buy, he came to the counter, and the cashier said, "Do you have gas, sir?" And he stopped and said, "No, not right now, but sometimes after supper." And it's like, we just, at the time, we just laughed. We thought he just made But, years later we look back and realize that a normal person wouldn't make that kind of mistake in a gas station.
Right.
But then there's also things where he's driving and he couldn't find locations he used to be able to find easily. The classic ones, when somebody can't find a long-time location they've always gone to in town, you got a good sense that something's not quite what it used to be anymore.
Terry didn't get lost so much, which I was expecting him to do, but we did have a little quote-unquote driving test every week, and I thought I was being very subtle. Terry, let's go so-and-so and get such and such. And one day, as he backed out of the driveway, he looked at me and he said, "You're testing me, aren't you?" And I said, "Yes, but I really, you're doing great, but I just want to make sure that you're safe." So he accepted that. But you're right. The ability to cover up your shortcomings early on in the disease is amazing.
It is.
And my ability to cover up Terry's shortcomings early on in the disease was amazing, too. Friends said later on, after we knew what the diagnosis was, "Well, I wondered why you were always finishing his sentences. And, we knew you were bossy, but that was a little over the top. And, you're just trying to hold on to your world, whatever that world was, until you can't anymore."
Right.
As the caregiver and as the patient.
Right. But I also found I had a situation sometimes where I almost kind of resented the fact that Grandpa would cover up when company was around. We'd have a crazy day, he'd be absolutely bonkers, and then company shows up and all of a sudden, whoop, he's almost normal. And everybody's like, "Oh, why are you here taking care of him? He's fine." What? No. They didn't say that, but you could kind of see it. And I kind of almost resented it. It's like, "Come on, Grandpa, put on the display. Let him see what it's really like over here."
I use this example to make sense of that, because that's often one of the frustrations for caregivers, or if they go to the doctor's office and they are able to pass every test and do everything fine. The way I compare that to is if you pop into my house on any random day, there's definitely going to be dust bunnies all over my house, and there might be some dishes or bottles or sippy cups or something in the sink, and toys all over my house. But if I know you're coming, my house is going to pass the white glove test. We're always on our best behavior when we're on display, and they're able to maintain that ability far into the progression of the disease.
Mm-hmm.
So that's probably what was happening. And even though as desperately we want people to see and really understand, I don't think people really would understand unless they've walked the same road or done the journey through dementia.
Exactly. And I always feel for family members who are able to visit their loved ones in a facility or at their home only periodically, because the change can be dramatic at certain stages of the disease, and that can be scary for someone who hasn't been along for the whole ride, and unfortunately maybe lead them to make a decision not to visit anymore because it's too hard. Mm-hmm. And then both you and your loved one are missing out on precious time together.
Yeah. It can be very contradictory as a caregiver, too, is that you don't like it when people don't know how hard it is for you. But then if the person in your care is having a bad day and people over there and they start giving looks and kind of whispering behind your hand, then you resent it that they're whispering. And sometimes you can never make a caregiver happy.
That's very true.
Exactly.
Very true.
So no matter where you are in your journey, with the dementia or Alzheimer's disease, we want to tell you about an event that's coming up. Rundy, you're actually the keynote speaker at this little thing called the Alzheimer's Caregiver Conference. It's at the Holiday Inn in Oneonta on April 28th, which is a Thursday. And you're going to talk about your experience, correct?
Yes, talk about my experience and kind of share it in a way to encourage and educate other people. It's not just a story time. It's telling my story to help illuminate other people on their journey through Alzheimer's as a caregiver, or just as a loved one who has someone who's going through the Alzheimer's journey. And it's relevant for everybody. It's not just for those who are caregivers. If you want to know how you can help a caregiver, come along out. There's always going to be somebody you're going to meet in your life at some point who has Alzheimer's. So it's a good chance to learn about the disease and to be able to help whoever it is, a caregiver or a loved one who's facing it.
And you're going to have some of your books there, correct?
Oh, absolutely. I'll have my books along. Anybody who's interested. buying a copy. They'll be there, and people can browse through them and ask me questions and share their own experience if they had a journey with Alzheimer's they've been through.
And if you're sitting at home and you're thinking this sounds like a great day, but there's no way you're going to be able to attend because you're a caregiver and you have to provide care for your loved one, well, you're in luck. With some persuading, I was able to organize free respite at the conference for folks who are interested. That is a service that does need to be RSVP'd for before April 21st. So At Home Care Incorporated actually is donating aides and home health aides and CNAs to be there that day to help people find the bathroom and any of the needs and assistance that they need with that. And Robinwood Adult Home, which is located in Oneonta, is donating their activities director for the day. So we do some intake documentations. We have some information about the individual, and then they coordinate some activities there for the person with the disease. So you could bring them with you to the conference. I meet them at the door and take them down to the respite room, and the caregiver is able to go and enjoy the day.
So if you don't need respite care, can you just show up on the day of the event and register then, or do you have to register in advance?
No, people can come the day of.
Okay.
So you still have 2 weeks to make that decision, or just show up. And actually, we have one more show here on the Eldercare Advocate the day before the conference, so we'll talk more about it then as well.
Cool.
So for people who are interested to learn more about the upcoming Caregivers Conference, more information can be found at alz.org/Northeastern, all spelled out, Northeastern NY, and then you click on special events. Or you could give me a call at my office, which is 607-547-1650. Again, that number is 607-547-1650. You can give me a call, and I'm more than happy to answer any questions or even to register you. And our friend here, Carol, and I are doing a workshop together at the conference.
We are, and just to give the conference a little plug, back in 2002, when Terry was first going through the diagnosis process, we had been in touch with the Alzheimer's Association local office here in the Leatherstocking region, and I went to a family education workshop and didn't sleep for nights afterwards. It was the most frightening experience I had ever had.
Oh, dear.
And, Terry and I vowed at that point to do what we could to encourage the association to change their attitude, their perspective, their...
I wasn't here in 2002. Let's just say that. No.
Yes, I know. To change their mission. And I'm happy to say that over the years, I had nothing to do with this, but Anne has. And the programs these days are forward-looking in a positive and helpful way. So I'd highly encourage anybody who has an interest, whether you're a caregiver or not, to join us on that day. You'll leave feeling refreshed, uplifted, and looking forward to spending good times with your loved one.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So go ahead, Anne.
I'm sorry. Excuse me. On those days that you feel very isolated and alone, come into a conference such as this one, you realize that you're not. There's going to be vendors there with lots of information about the different services available locally, as well as you get an opportunity to chat with other people in the same experience, the same situation as you.
And will there be information there about local caregiving groups that someone could attend?
Yes. Yep. I actually facilitate a couple support groups. All that information will be there. Carol and I are starting a new support group in Oneonta in the evenings this fall. So there's tons of information about other educational programs coming up, services in the area, the Office for the Agents, the New York Connect, some of these home care agencies. There's all different types of information there.
Good.
And the conference has grown. Last year we had 106 people, I think it was, that attended. My goal this year is 120. So hopefully everyone that's listening will help me reach that goal.
And we're serving lunch.
We are.
So there will be time for you to perhaps sit down and chat with another person on the journey, whether they're in the same boat as you or not. There will be time just to make some connections, and sometimes that's the most valuable part of a conference like this.
Absolutely. I'm always impressed by how when you get a bunch of caregivers together, they all start talking, and everybody comes away feeling encouraged, because it's like, oh yeah, I went through that too. And oh yeah, they have something that I could learn from. And you, like Anne said, you really don't feel so alone when you have other people around who've gone through the same thing that you've gone through.
And to hear helpful hints, I remember speaking with a family who were challenged by their loved one's incontinence, and that traveling was an issue and so forth. And I said, I bought myself a diaper bag. It was black, so nobody knew. But I was able to carry, wipes and extra underwear and so forth. And they said, why didn't I think of that? Well, now you did. So everything from comfort and spiritual support to helpful little hints on how to make the journey a little easier.
So a little bit more about the different sessions there. So we'll, like I said before, we'll have Rundy there to share his experiences. And then we also have an introduction to managed long-term care and the ICANN program. So this workshop is actually going to discuss the new in-home services that the New York State is offering through their Medicaid office. So we'll learn how to get qualified for that and actually what services would be covered through that. And be able to start and plan for that process. Because when you do apply for Medicaid, it usually is a process. There's no quick fix. So it's better to get the information and stick it away in your tickler file for down the road just in case. I was actually a public relation major in college, and my philosophy is to plan for the worst and hope for the best. So I always have plan A, plan B, plan C, and sometimes plan D for every scenario.
That's a good approach for caregiving too, by the way.
Exactly. So here's the time to come and start learning what you need to plan for in the future. And then Carol, myself, and another friend / colleague, Cindy Ploutz, who's an assistant professor at Hartwick College, are doing an interactive discussion centered around communication.
Yeah, we. I don't remember whose idea it was. It might have been Cindy, who's in the nursing department up at Hartwick College. We decided to recruit some older folks. That would be me, and a dear friend, Fred Johnson, who was a caregiver for his wife. And we lightly scripted out some scenarios that most caregivers encounter at one point or another. How to get your loved one to a doctor's appointment, for example. And we taped a little session of how to handle that the wrong way, and then retaped it, how to handle that the right way. And so we're going to look at 3 of those clips, wrong way, right way, on each of those 3 circumstances, and have a discussion about, what did you see in the wrong way? How did that make you feel? What could have been different? And hopefully it'll be very interactive, and we plan to encourage folks to speak by using a few little prizes, so come on over. The hardest part about taping that, I think, for Fred and me was that we know each other well, and he's a dear, dear man, and I found it difficult to get frustrated and angry with him, and he found it difficult to be belligerent. But once we shook hands and went on, I think we were able to do the job.
I think they're fabulous. I actually missed out on the recording of those videos. I wasn't able to attend, and I just watched them last week, and they're phenomenal. They're really well done, and I'm looking forward to developing some more as we move forward and using them in many different settings to educate families and professionals about the different approaches to behaviors and communication issues with folks with dementia. And then to wrap up the day, we actually have some chair yoga and relaxation and meditation to give you some tools and techniques to make sure you take care of yourself through the journey. Because that's really what it is. When you're a caregiver for somebody with dementia, I look at it as a journey, as a long road, and you really need to prepare for the journey and take care of yourself along the way. So, Rundy, how did you take care of yourself?
Exercise was a big part of it. I both had a weekly schedule for taking bike rides and a weekly schedule of lifting weights, exercising. Sometimes I didn't get to do it until late at night, but I always try to make sure that I did it because that helped me burn off the stress and helped me sleep better at night and helped me kind of remember that the world is a little bigger. If you go on a bike ride, you could look up and down the street and remember there was a world outside the doors of the crazy house that you were living in. But perhaps also key for me was that I wrote about my journey. About as soon as I started taking care of Grandpa, I sat down and started a blog about taking care of Grandpa. And sometimes if I had a real bad day, I'd be up to 11 o'clock at night, tippity-tap in that keyboard, venting it all out. And by the time the journey was over, when I compiled all those posts into a book, it was a book about that. Oh, you can't see on radio, but about 2 inches thick of. Some of it was pretty repetitive, Today was a bad day. Grandpa made too many messes on the floor. But writing it out helped me feel validated and like it was meaningful. And at the end, all that experience became the seed that turned into my book, The Sea is Wide, a Memoir of Caregiving. And so I managed to go back and comb through all of that and find the nuggets that could be passed on to other people and be helpful for them. And so it turned into something that actually bore fruit for other people. But for me, exercise and writing were the two key ways in which I coped.
I kept a journal during those years. But unlike Rundy, my writing's not so good. And I'm already thinking ahead. I hope I know when my last day is going to be because I plan on burning it before anyone else gets their hands on it. But it was a stress reliever. And now, rereading some of those passages and looking back, it's bittersweet. And it's a good way to remember those happy days and the not-so-happy days, but you got through them.
Yep.
And, yeah, that was a great stress reliever. But I'm still not sharing it.
And that's okay.
Yeah.
I mean, we get to decide what we want to share and what we feel comfortable sharing, and then we don't have to share those things.
That's right.
Keep our stories to ourselves, some of them. But there's many ways in which you can take care of yourself. But that's really the main thing we need to do is to take care of ourselves, because that's the best thing we can do for our loved one with a dementia or Alzheimer's disease. Whether it's, to schedule a time to call a girlfriend or a best friend. I know a caregiver I see on a regular basis in Schoharie County. He actually goes and gets a massage once a month. That's his outlet, and he's able to do that. I know somebody else, it's important for them to go bowling once a week. It's whatever it is important to you. Myself, at my current caregiving situation, I look forward to going to wander around the mall or Walmart by myself for an hour. If I have a free hour, or I might sit in the parking lot and call a girlfriend from college. I don't even actually have to go anywhere or do anything. But just know that I have some free time to myself, because that's going to rejuvenate me to provide the level of care that's important to me.
If at all possible, I always encourage people to have one day a week where you're off. Now, I know not every caregiver can do it, but you can have just one day where for the whole day you can go away and do whatever you want, but it's a day away. And so you can come back in the evening and start the next week and go through that week knowing that at the end of the week you have another day away, and the next week you have another day away. It helps you get through things to have that ahead of you every week, to say, I got one day where I'll have a break and I won't have to face this.
Mm-hmm. And even if it's not a full day, just to know that you're able to carve out a little bit of time, as Ann said, just to be still. Just to sit and gather your wits and sit in the park, sit by a creek, sit in your house, just a little de-stress time.
Take a nap.
Take a nap.
Oh, yeah. Need them always.
Yeah,
A nap
absolutely.
would be awesome.
Yeah.
So we're the Caregivers Conference, if you're just tuning in, the Alzheimer's Association of Northeastern New York, the Leatherstocking region, is actually hosting a full-day Caregivers Conference. It will be at the Holiday Inn in Oneonta on Thursday, April 28th. Registration starts at 9:30. I will be introducing our keynote speaker at 10, who's here with us today, Rundy. Purdy. Actually, I know we're on the air, but I think this is a little funny thing. I'm horrible with names, so if anyone out there is listening, please know that you're not alone. I'm really bad with names. So it was my inside joke, my voice, to help me remember Rundy's name. It was like, for the last month, I've been calling you Rundy Purdy.
There you go.
So that was my trick to remember your name, and so I was so glad every time I go say Purdy, I always want to say Purdy. So,
well, other people have done Rundy Grundy, so
Rundy Purdy works. Okay, and so. We'll have some refreshments when you get there in the morning. So we have some Danishes, some coffee and whatnot. And then we have our keynote speaker who will share his experience. We have a book signing. And then we'll have some books there if anyone's interested in purchasing them. Excuse me. And we also have some vendors, so some local agencies, the Offices for the Aging, the Alzheimer's Association, New York Connects. We'll have some tables there. We can collect some more information about the services available locally. And then in the afternoon, we get lunch. There's some a deli plate and different food options for folks. And then in the afternoon, we have somebody from the Empire Justice Center who's coming to discuss the Managed Long-Term Care Programs, which is New York State's solution to help keep people home longer in the least restrictive, supportive environment. So we'll learn more about that. And then we get some cookies and milk, I think. And then also, we're doing some afternoon sessions on about communication and the approach and some general relaxation. And if you are currently a caregiver and you're concerned that you will not be able to attend because of your caregiver responsibilities, rest at ease, because we've been able to coordinate some free respite at the conference. So there are some people there that will be able to help your loved one to the restroom, with their lunch and all of those types of things, as well as somebody there to help schedule some activities and keep them active and socialization. I've done this for the last few years, and it's always a joy to visit the respite room and see the smiles and the interaction amongst them. Because as isolated that you may feel as a caregiver, oftentimes our loved one with the disease is feeling the cabin fever as much as we are.
Absolutely.
Did you find that an experience with Grandpa?
Yeah, early in the disease, he wanted to visit people and do things, but as it got increasingly scary, it became too much. But he loved to have people come visit him. He had to kind of sit on the couch once it got to a certain point because going outside was just too scary. But he loved to have family stop by and visit, and it really brightened up his day to have that interaction.
How about you, Carol? Did you find that Terry got cabin fever as time went on?
Oh, very much so. And that was maybe another advantage for placement in the nursing home in our situation. Because after we moved there, and Terry had the ability to walk freely throughout the unit and access to outdoors and so forth, I began to realize that he probably had felt like a prisoner at home, needing to have me with him if he was outside and not able to go outside on his own without me watching and those kinds of things. So, yeah, and he was probably the most social guy I've ever known. So he loved to have folks visit. And surprisingly, although he didn't know names, he remembered faces right till his last days, which was pretty remarkable.
He did. Obviously, Terry, as the disease progressed, and he hadn't said my name in probably years, but when I would walk in to see him, his eyes would light up, where I knew there was that level of recognition, where he knew who I was. And that's an important message for people is even after they've lost their ability to speak, it's still hard to know how much they really understand. And I always felt that Terry was able to understand really far into the progression of the disease. I would almost say to the end.
I agree.
Yes,
I
absolutely.
agree.
He laughed at my jokes at the appropriate times.
And he rolled his eyes at my jokes.
Right. And we just have to adjust the way that we interact with them.
Right.
One of the things I always enjoyed doing with Terry is I made up some CDs, what I would refer to as classic rock, and I would play them when I visited. And I'm a horrible, horrible singer and dancer. I'm horrible at it. But I would close the door so staff wouldn't see me and dance and sing. And, just to see the laughter and the smiles on his face. You don't need to understand to laugh, really.
Exactly. Exactly.
I would always make jokes with Grandpa and always tease him because it made him feel like he was my equal. Because if you can laugh and joke with somebody, they are your equal.
That's what it's all about, to find out where they are, what world they're living in at that moment, and join them there. And it doesn't take a lot of words to do that. It takes facial expression and the look in your eyes and your gestures and so forth, and that's great communication.
And kindness.
And kindness,
Absolutely.
absolutely.
Empathy goes a long way. I try to think of how I would want to be treated if I was in that situation, and that's really the key to dementia care.
Exactly. Don't speak to me like I'm a baby. Don't talk loudly because I don't speak. Just treat me as though I'm the person I always was, because in many cases and in many aspects they are. In many ways they are. Yeah.
That's right.
And I had a question about the caregiver conference, just a quick one. I've heard from people in the past who say, I can be there for the morning or I can be there for the afternoon. Is it okay to come for half a day?
Of course.
Okay.
Come for whatever you're able to attend. If you have any questions, I'm going to upload a link on the Eldercare Advocate Facebook page so people can find the link there to the conference information. And again, if you have questions, you can call my office. I'll actually be in the office tomorrow morning. I'll be there at 8:30, so if anyone wants to give me a call then, or leave a message for me today, and I'll give you a call back tomorrow. My office number is 607-547-1650. Go grab a pen. I'm going to stall for a little bit for you, so you have time to go find that pen because you had no idea I was going to give you a telephone number. Okay, you have that pen? You ready? Here we go. 607-547-1650. 607-547-1650. Or you could visit our webpage at alz.org/Northeastern, all spelled out, NY. And it's listed under the upcoming events. And I hope to see you there.
Well, you'll see us there.
You'll see us there.
Yeah, so if you want to meet the folks behind the voice, we look forward to seeing you on April 28th at the Holiday Inn. Thank you both for being here today.
I'm so glad I could make it.
And as always, it's a pleasure. And Rundy, a great pleasure to meet you.
You too.
Thanks.
I'm looking forward to my book. You've been listening to the Eldercare Advocate here on WIOX Community Radio at 91.3 FM from the Catskills at WIOXradio.org. I'll be back in 2 weeks, and we'll be speaking with Maria Kelso about her compassionate experience as a caregiver. Again, more information about the upcoming Caregivers Conference on Thursday, April 28th at the Holiday Inn in Oneonta can be obtained by calling 607-547-1650 or by visiting our website, alz.org/Northeastern, all spelled out, NY, and it's listed under upcoming events. Stay tuned for alternative